diversity is going to come. That's why the cover crops are so critical. That's why we're able to get that kind of benefit from them. We would get some there's benefit to just corn, bean, wheat rotation, or getting corn, beans, maybe try barley or something like that in the rotation. There'd be benefit from that, and I'm not against that. I'm just saying that right now our economic structure and infrastructure is set up for corn and soybeans, so diversity is more than likely going to come from the cover crops. So, things that we have to understand about disturbance. We've talked a lot about disturbance as though, the agricultural disturbances in general, the general statement is that they are generally antagonistic to those spheres of influence that I was just talking about, and are generally antagonistic to habitat for soil organisms. Okay, but we've mostly been saying that disturbance is just tillage. Okay, I'm going to throw a few things out there, and this is why I maybe I was trying to warm up and give my ag retailers a hug here before I went into this thing. There are other disturbances that can be antagonistic to our soil health strategies. Okay, there's physical. Even overgrazing, that's a physical disturbance if we overgraze. It's kind of a biological and a physical and a, it fits into multiple things. There's chemical disturbance that can happen. I'm just going to tell you that there's plenty of literature that says that if you have a soil test phosphorus level of 600, you are going to have a very, very hard time establishing mycorrhizal colonization. Because when most mycorrhizal plants like corn have all the phosphorus that they want, they don't send out a signature, and they don't send out an exudate that triggers the colonization of some of those things. Okay, so more is not always better when it comes to some of our chemistry that's out there. Just what I call prophylactic use of some of our pesticides. You saw those little things crawling around in the video? They're all doing something for us. They're helping us break down residue. Springtails we talked about. When you really talk to the entomologists, a lot of the products that we're putting on that are just in case are wiping out those beneficial organisms. Yeah, they're knocking back the pest pressure, but they're also knocking back some of our beneficial organisms populations also. So we have to just be cognizant of that. These chemicals are extremely important to us, and we need them when we need them. But if we overuse anything like this, we could be setting ourselves up for a time that they're less of a value down the road. Okay, or they just get taken away from us, and we don't want that. But there can be chemical disturbances, just like it can be physical disturbances. There can be biological disturbances. We're seeing biological disturbances across the Midwest right now with the fact that there's biological things coming in that are herbicide resistant, they're invasive species, there's things coming in that are major problems. And those are biological disturbances that set off the balance of what's going on in these functional groups. Okay? I'm actually, I'm on constant guard, even in our cover crop stuff, that we're real picky before we'll put a cover crop on to our cover crop standard in NRCS. I've actually got an invasive species committee that goes to. If I'm considering putting, let's say, a new one like sun hemp's kind of new, before we put sun hemp on, send that up to our invasive species task force that is actually a state committee that looks at weeds and looks at other things. It says, anything about this that you've got a major problem with or you see as a major problem. There's some of our brassicas, some of our mustards. They could cross up with some of the things that are already out there in the way of weeds and things, and we have to try our best. We're never going to be able to predict the future in every situation, but we've got to make sure that we're not just doing a knee-jerk reaction saying, yeah, let's do that. But there can be biological disturbances to the overall, messes up the whole thing. Right now, one of our single biggest barriers to getting cover crops is Palmer amaranth. We just talked about it. What are we doing for Palmer amaranth? Man, throw all kinds of residual out there, make sure nothing's going to come up all summer long. Well, are you going to get a cover crop, nice diverse cover crop mix going if you had Lexar out there or Zidua or something like that? No, you're not. Okay, so anyway, these things, there's a lot of things that can interact in our planning. This is part of our planning, is we need to understand that. Human nature is, when in doubt, you saw me the other day, when in doubt, get out the plow, right? Fix it, and fix it now. A lot of times, the first thing we grab is time. And there's a pretty significant amount of research right now that shows that yes, it fixes it in that moment, but in a very short period of time, that soil will not just go back, it will likely go back and be worse. One thing for sure you can be sure of, if you ran this to bust up compaction, the odds of you creating more compaction the next year has just gone up by about 50%. Because now you're going to get to go to the full depth with that axle load and cause compaction. Okay? So it's just, that's part of our drive, and it's part of our plan. We need that as an understanding before we do this kind of planning. We have to understand that this does as good, we were in those pits today, this does as much deep ripping as anything, and leaves behind a biological signature that holds what you just busted up open and creates new airspace and new pockets without causing the fluff that lets the tractor drop to its axle next fall. Okay? So we have a way to fix problems biologically rather than that kind of strong urge to fix it now with iron. Okay? We have to understand in our planting process that the healthier our soil is, the more forgiving it is. And we hear this from folks like Dave Brandt and some people, and I'm not trying to tell everybody in here to go out and start planting in the head-high rye. But as they get farther along, they not only have their own personal confidence built up, but their soil gains a confidence in that it is now very forgiving, and you can plant through this, and maybe the seed didn't get absolutely placed where it has to be, but their soil is good enough that it's very forgiving, and you still get a crop, you still get a plant up, and you get things to happen that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened. So the system is very forgiving, and the farther you get into it, the more you can get away with. And that's partly our mental confidence, but partly the soil gains a confidence for you too, in that it's very forgiving. Microorganisms with crop diversity. Something you need to know about diversity, the word diversity and biological diversity. We've got a microbiologist that's on our team now that's actually quite good. You had Jennifer here at your crop production meetings, right? Elliot, and kind of went over pretty, she did okay, possibly? Having these biologists join our team brings a wealth of knowledge that most of us in agronomy never got to enjoy before. And so she gave us, she says, now, we probably overused the word just flat out diversity. She says, we found that in the driest of all deserts, when they truly get under the true microscope and look, there's as much or more diversity there than there is in a healthy soil. That didn't make any sense. We were all destroyed, weren't we, Doug? Well, if you think about it, yeah, there's unbelievable species and DNA of diversity in that pretty much dead soil because it's all sitting there dormant. When you start getting healthy soil, those that are functionally beneficial and functionally important to the system rise to the top, so you have higher functional diversity, but not necessarily a total diversity improvement. But that's a hard thing for us to grasp, but it's the functional important groups that we're gaining diversity in. Doug, help me explain that.
No. One of the things we talked about at lunch was some different books, and in a book called Holistic Management, which is it's kind of a grazing book, but it also, coincidentally enough, it teaches 4 principles that are almost exactly the same as the principles that we teach. And I kind of like the term in it, a little different than diversity. It says community dynamics.
There you go.
And so it really is teaching that there's interactions between all the different things in that community, that soil community, the plant community. That it's not just diversity; it's the dynamics between all of the different things. And everything you do, doing one little thing, has a ripple effect and impacts all aspects of that community. And so I just like that term, community dynamics. It just helps me understand what diversity is a little bit.
Right. I just thought we needed to kind of talk about that, just because that's getting ready to set up for the point that if there's functional groups of biology in the soil, there's also functional plants that promote those functional groups. And so as we look at what plants we're kind of going to try to use as cover crops to achieve this diversity that we're after, we kind of have to understand that there's functional groups of diversity in the soil, so we need to look at the functional groups of plants in the crop rotation too. So if you grow more different kinds of plants in the same rotational period, that's our cover crops, we'll actually got data to support that we increase soil organic matter when we do that. We break pest cycles and improve nutrient availability. Biology doesn't know there's 12 months in a year. Okay, biology changes in sometimes seconds, minutes, and hours. And so when you introduce something new into there, you're planting a cover crop, even for a short period of time, the biological benefit is great from that. Okay, so they sometimes you can break a pest cycle with a cover crop or a short season crop that you wouldn't otherwise think that the idea is on. We got to do that a whole year, to break that pest cycle. But it's not always the case. We got to find those windows of management. We've got to change and plan for. It's like what we talked about, maybe a short season variety. I think I might have that here. But the key to success is the lack of severely limits what we're trying to accomplish here. And so the diversity above ground, what we see above ground is many times we can say that that's happening below ground. If we look for these niches, how are we going to get diversity? Then adding a crop like wheat, when you can get some extra diversity in there, like we saw today, that you've got to know what your absolute objective is. When a producer comes into your office, before you can plan any system with them, the very first thing that you should ask is, well, what is it you want this to do? Somebody comes in, they hear about cover crops, or they sign up for cover crops, or they want to sign up for cover crops. You've got to ask them right out of the gate, what is it you want that cover crop to do? If they tell you weed control, whole new set of what you're gonna recommend then, right? We talked about that earlier. That's way different than just scavenging nitrogen. 41 pounds of cereal rye will scavenge most of the nitrogen. That'll take care of most of that whole issue that we've talked about. From a water quality standpoint, we don't need much more than that, or any more than that, based on what we saw today. But if we're an organic producer and we're trying to control manage whole new planning procedure that's got to come into effect. We've got to understand what is it that you want this to do. Okay? And that has to be, we have in NRCS a planning process where we identify resource concerns, And that's usually thought of as we walk the land and identify the resource concerns. But part of it is, you got to ask that producer, what are their expectations? What are they trying to get out of this? When it comes to trying to get this diversity into the system, we think, oh my God, I just don't have very much time. But here's my annual grain crop. How can I, here's this window of ground, that's at the front end and the back end of my cropping season. That's really a long period of time. If you think that really that corn crop starts senescing in August, it's not doing much new roots, whether it's corn or soybeans, from August on, and from August to November is a long time. It's longer than we sometimes think that is to get that niche in there, to find a place for these crops to get some biodiversity. Okay, this just I forgot I had that slide that kind of shows that we can get now. A lot of you are saying out there, oh God, though, that's not much growth. That's not much growth. The thing that we forget about our annual crops is that this is a lot of top growth, but when we look at the roots, our cash crops are kind of puny when it comes to roots. We plant them in May, they grow through June. By early August, root growth pretty much stops, because what's this thing designed to do? What did we breed it to do?
Make grain.
All energy is focused to making that ear, right? Same thing with almost all of our cash grains. So we're shutting down root growth, and it's hotter than blue blaze. That soil's now 100 degrees possibly, so there's not going to be much root activity or biological activity in the soil after that. So there it is. Beans, we wonder why we can't grow or build organic matter in corn bean rotation. Look at the roots from soybeans. Not much happening. The other thing that stops, when the roots stop growing, nitrogen fixation stops growing too. This idea that beans give us a nitrogen credit is not really the case anymore. They just didn't have the carbon penalty that corn does, okay? So it's not really, we call it a nitrogen credit, but really it's not, it's just a non-carbon. Well, let's look at if we establish rye and hairy vetch though. Remember, we had this little bit of growth at each end. It wasn't very much, wasn't very significant, but look at the roots. Look what happens on September to October. We're already surpassing what the soybeans were going to do. Then, guess what? It takes off growing again next spring, pretty early. Rye does. Look what happens if we let that grow to mid-May. We've almost doubled the root biomass of our cropping system. So why do we think that we build organic matter twice as fast when we add cover crops? It's in the roots. Different crops, different classifications of different plants also fit that biological functional group. And you need to be familiar with an ideal diversity system or planned rotation will have as many of the functional plant groups as possible, okay? So if we look at morphology, there's broadleaves, there's grasses, there's cool season, there's warm season plants. Okay, so as we're trying to strategically plan the system, we can look at warm season classification. We would like to have, here's warm season grasses, corn, millet, sudan. We've already got corn in the rotation. So that's meeting a lot of that functional group design. But we could have sorghum, sudex, there's all these other things that we can add. Warm season broadleaves, we've got alfalfa. Guess what? We've already got soybeans as a warm season broadleaf. I'll throw a fifth one in there that if we can get broadleaf legumes and broadleaf non-legumes, they probably are going to almost add a fifth functional group. Okay, so we got warm season grasses, warm season broadleaves, cool season grasses. These look familiar. And cool season broadleaves. Okay? These look familiar. We had some of those. Okay? Canola is rapeseed, the same thing. Okay? So in a perfect world of planning a perfect system as a goal of ours, we would like to at least get within our crop rotation, we'd like to get these 4 functional groups out there. They're just going to respond and they're going to attract a broader functional biology underneath them, okay? And I know that we can't always in every year, but as we work through our, our 2-year crop rotation with cover crops, when possible, why I almost always will throw the rapeseed in with the cereal rye, because I can almost always get both of them to come up, and I've met both of my cool season functional groups, because I've already got my warm season functional groups, corn and soybeans. So I've got my 4 functional groups within a single rotation. Not that I'd like to have them more often, but as a minimum, I try to get that done as far as planning the overall system. Okay? And the reason that someone come up with this, Jay Fuhrer was the first one I ever heard him talk about this. I don't know, Doug, if you heard somebody, but there's Elaine Ingham, and there's a whole bunch of authors and scientists that have been looking at ecology type things, and they're trying to mimic the native prairie. Because it set forth such a perfect example for us, it's hard not to keep looking back at that and saying, really good stuff happened when that was all there, and we can see the result of it when we're in that soil pit out there. Okay? The influence of functional diversity, we've got, there's work that a lot of folks have done. This is not just made up. As we add species of diversity, the different functional groups, as we add functional groups, we immediately increase biomass. Okay? Plant biomass goes up. Plants like growing together. They're far more collaborative than they are competitive when it comes to biomass. It's not necessarily true as far as grain production goes. I'm not saying that we need to be growing all of our crops out in a big giant field with all together. From a grain standpoint, that may not be true, but from sheer biomass, if it's biomass is our goal, we find that in our grazing systems and prairie systems and everything, that biomass is very important. Okay, so as we build functional diversity, the same thing happens. The different functional groups. Okay, so how to keep a living root? There's a lot of strategies. Here's one that I use a lot. I've found some shorter season soybeans that, boy, when you say that to a lot of people, I say, oh my God, the yield hit is unbelievable. Keep in mind that longer seasons get the benefit in a conventionally farming system where most of the research is done, because one, you plant them earlier and they get to take advantage of early rains, but then they get a chance to take advantage of late water, late moisture. It's all water related. In this system, we're managing water a different way. So you will take less of a penalty for a shorter season bean under this system where you plant it into that cereal rye than you will if it was just short season bean planted into bare soil. Follow me how that, it's not as much of a penalty. Planting date is not as much a penalty. You can gain a lot of extra biomass by just giving that field 2 more weeks in the spring before you plant the corn, and let that crimson clover come up and grow a little bit more. Let that cover crop grow just a little bit more. And the penalty, the yield penalty, isn't usually as great because the penalty always is related to water and heat. We've cooled the soil temperature, we've provided more water. So the penalty isn't as great for planting a little bit later, when in the early stages of building this system, growing biomass is really a lot. 2 weeks in spring of the year. That rye cover crop out there in 2 weeks is going to put down a lot more roots of biomass. Okay? It's going to make really trying to grow this organic matter early in the system. That is really important. And so there are some things that we know about strategies that can help us. Interseeding. is one that was on there. And then we'll talk, some of these next level innovations are not for the faint of heart, okay? They're mixture of, some of these things are not for the first timer, they're not for the faint of heart, and they're not, please don't plan a train wreck. Part of what our job as planners is to kind of do an evaluation of this person's management abilities and management, where are they in their management evolution as far as toward this soil health system. Okay? Our first job is to do no harm. So don't cause a train wreck. Don't over what Brett was talking about. Don't jump out there and throw a whole bunch of CSP cover crop things at them because it looks like a lot of money when really their management's not ready for this. Okay? So, but as comfort level grows, this is the next level that is possibly very profound. We have guidance equipment that can allow us to plant different species. We'll see this Friday down at Junior Upton's, where he's seeded, strategically seeded crops that winter till that becomes kind of a biological strip till. When those radishes die, that's a really warm, dry spot. In between, we're going to let the legumes grow a little longer. We're going to let some of the grasses grow a little longer, get more biomass, and then burn them down afterwards, okay? So that's some of the things that are really kind of forward. They're out there, but we have technological possibilities with autosteer and guidance and equipment. We can get this done when we really decide we want to, okay? This is some of the interseeding stuff. Don't let who's the crop, we got several crop insurance people in here. This is just for experimental purposes only. Okay?
Just gotta have a conservation plan.
You gotta have a conservation plan that shows that it's there, but we've got some folks having really, they're kind of quiet about it, but there's some really good results happening here. Where we're interseeding different cover crops at about B5, B6, okay? So once we decide, I said this earlier, farmers are the most innovative people on the planet. Once we decide that we want to, we'll figure out a lot of this stuff and take it to levels that we never even thought was possible. Once we decide that pursuit of this soil health thing is what we want to do, we'll figure out a lot of stuff. All right, I'm going to move pretty quick here to get things wrapped up. We've covered some of these things. We know what the living roots do, and understanding what that's doing for us is very important. The most important thing possibly here, I hope it's on there, this part where we sequester and redeposit nutrients. That does mean, and I've harped on it 2 or 3 times today, that when we introduce a system like this that's so different than what many of us taught and the principles that we were taught of agronomy and fertility, the first feeders to the trough are the microbes and that cover crop roots. And the early part of management of nutrients, we may need to change the timing of nitrogen application and things like that when we're planting corn into this or planting a crop that needs that soluble nutrient. It's not just the nitrogen. These things also have any plant available soluble nutrient that is mineralized over the winter, and it's there, so it gets it. Okay, so as we kill it, there is a time lag before any of it starts getting released back. This can be a tremendous benefit if you know it's going to happen and you plan for it. It can be a bit of a train wreck if you had no idea that was going to happen. This even happens going from conventional to no-till. When you till a 4% organic matter drummer soil, it's a fertilizer application that we've enjoyed this whole time. We've been mining off organic matter to get it, but we've enjoyed that. The day that we decide to stop doing that is the day that we all of a sudden also didn't apply that early spring fertilizer that was our starter. So when we switch to this system, we've got to adapt our nutrient management to complement it. And that is where more train wrecks happen and trying to get people to adopt no-till or this conservation cropping system, it happens there more than it does any other place, because we weren't ready for it. No one really ever focused on the fact that the crop gets over half of its nutrients from the soil, not from the fertilizer. We can't prevent that. Nature won't let that plant not get its bulk of its nutrients from the soil. A lot of the fertilizer work we're doing, we're just replacing for down the road that bank account of soil and feeding the microbes and doing things like that. But it's not like it's all going away, it's being lost. It's part of the system later. Okay? That's a very important planning consideration that we have to be able to describe and plan for with our producers. Soil temperatures are going to change. Do we want warmer soil or colder soil? What's better?
Are you talking on April or July?
There you go. Cold temperature is our enemy in the spring, right? And is no-till and cover crops always colder in the spring? I have an ongoing battle with a good friend of mine, Eileen Clevivko, that's a soil physicist there at Purdue University, and she says, "You're crazy, you can't tell them that this system's gonna have the warmer soil, but that's absurd." And she's right, probably at 4 in the afternoon on May 1, when, you know, a graduate student would go out to take those temperatures. Okay, but at 8 o'clock in the morning, when you're getting ready to fire up the planter and getting ready to drop seed in the ground, and it's been a cold night, I'm going to suggest that the heavier cover is probably going to be warmer at that time of day. It's all about even time of day will change. So temperature is a real debate. The most important part of all of this is, one, don't be nearly as afraid of those colder temperatures in the spring as a lot of people think they have to be, especially in dark soil country. That temperature in the summer is very critical. Okay, we're trying to get life going. We're trying to build aggregate stability in the surface. And we know, we've talked about it, that the only way we're going to build aggregate stability in the surface is how? Biologically, with something alive. And when we start reaching the temperatures that we get in the summer, I'm just telling you, it's going to be awfully hard if that soil is unprotected and bare and exposed to the sunlight and hitting temperatures like 113, 114. Okay? Really, really critical that the benefit is there for that. So key points to in a planning system is tillage with cover crops is better than nothing, but you won't get the benefits if you can leave those cover crops undisturbed and leave it alone. We saw that, leaving that drillosphere, leaving all those rhizosphere in place. Tillage burns up organic matter, speeds up mineralization. Cover crops make no-till more successful with many more crops, and especially even with vegetable crops and things like that. Okay? There's the planning principles again, just so that you have them put to memory. And here's your last look of the day at your 4 principles that you have now chalked up to your memory card, your permanent hard drive that's in that brain. Minimize disturbance, maximize soil cover, maximize biodiversity, provide continuous living roots.